Once again, we're in AD 29, we're at event 51, where there's really two events only in Matthew, but the first part of that event is found also in Mark 9, verses 30 through 32, and from Luke 9, 43 through 45. Luke has probably the least to say about this first event, and Matthew is the one that actually covers two events, which are both considered event 51. Nevertheless, we find just a short, brief message in the first event and a little bit longer description in the second event. The first event is Jesus repeating the fact that he would be turned over into the hands of men who would kill him and that he would rise on the third day. Matthew clearly states that, and it says that the disciples were grieved, and they're in the region of Galilee, where they've gone quietly this time, not to draw large crowds. And it also tells us that he was trying to teach his disciples many things, and one of those things was that he was going to be killed by men and that he would rise on the third day. And we find that also in Mark, and we find that they didn't really fully understand what that meant, and were afraid to ask what that meant. In Luke, we find that he actually comes out and says, "Let these words sink into your ears." So he wanted them to be able to remember that he had foretold this, that he would be killed by men and that he would rise. But we also know that there's a second part in Matthew that we need to look at, and it's quite interesting because it's one of the strange things that Jesus did, and that is that when he entered back into Capernaum, there was the time of year that they would be taking a temple tax. And the temple tax is the basis for it found in Exodus chapter 30, verses 13. That's Exodus 30:13. And the basis for this temple tax was that they were to take this up not only to help maintain the temple and the operation of the temple, but it was an atonement tax, so that you would find atonement through the tax. Well, we know you're not going to get atonement through a tax, but nevertheless, that's what it's called in Exodus 30:13. The temple tax was 2 drachmas. Now, I know that all of you deal in drachmas every day, so let me help you a little bit. A shekel is 4 drachmas. I know that didn't help you much either. So a drachma was a day's wages. Today, that'd be about $32. So each person was responsible for giving 2 drachmas, or $64, or 2 days' wages. And as they enter into Capernaum, one of these tax collectors asks Peter, "Is your teacher, your master, going to go ahead and pay the temple tax?" And Jesus says to Peter something very shrewd. He says to Peter, he said, "When they take taxes, do kings tax their sons, or do they tax strangers?" And Peter says, "Well, they tax strangers, not sons." And of course, Jesus has just opened up to show that he has justification for not paying the temple tax, because he's a son of the Father, son of the King of Kings, and that he should be exempt just as they are. But he says, out of not offending or not taking offense, we're going to go ahead and pay the tax. Peter had already told the tax collector, we're going to pay the tax. He knew that Jesus followed the Mosaic law, and he knew that these things were going to be the case. I've got a telephone call, and I've got to put this on hold.
Call from Lenoir and G.
Well, as you can see, I don't have a sound studio, so when the phone rings, it interrupts what I've done, and I was so far in, I didn't want to stop so you'll have that interruption. I'm sorry. In any case, this would have been around March 15th through the 25th on our calendar, the month of Adar in the Jewish calendar. and the tax was for everyone over 20 years of age. But Jesus decides that he doesn't want to offend them, and he tells Peter, he says, go down to the sea, throw a hook and a fishing line into the water, and take the first fish that you catch and check in its mouth. And lo and behold, there's a stater. Now, we haven't talked about a stater yet. A stater equaled 2 denarii, or 4 drachmas. And Jesus says, now, Peter, pay your poll tax, your temple tax, and mine with that money. Now, I love John Phillips. He does some divine speculation on this. He says, I'm hoping that Peter went and got the tax collector and said, come on down to the sea, we're going to do some fishing. And when he brought in the first fish, he says, okay, let's take a look in his mouth, and gave him the toll tax or the temple tax. And the guy could see the kind of miracles that Jesus was capable of performing. In any case, that's divine speculation or wishful thinking that he did that so that it would be a witness to the tax collectors. So we see that Jesus wanted to obey the Mosaic law, even though he didn't feel like he had any responsibility as the son of the King of Kings. And we find also that he has made it clear to his disciples that he's going to be killed and raised on the third day. Even if they didn't fully understand what that meant, they would reflect back on that after his resurrection. And what a Savior we have. What a Lord and Savior we have to so foretell his death and resurrection, and to be able to pay his temple tax in a miraculous way. By having the first fish that Peter catches have exactly the amount of the temple tax that was needed for both of them. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.